Hello, everyone. It's Donna Marie, and welcome to the Best Life of Wellbeing podcast, designed to encourage you to embrace your whole life by focusing on your end of life and your overall well being. In honor of Women's History Month, we are celebrating a woman history maker, Ms. Ruth Pegeron, founder and owner of Laid to Rest Cremation and Funeral Home. Today is also National Funeral Director and Mortician Recognition Day, so our timing is perfect. Please listen as we talk about legacy, grief, how to pick a funeral home, end of life planning, and end of life funding. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so that you know when new content drops, like our content, and please share your comments. We want to hear from you. Welcome, Ruth Pegeron, to the Best Life of Wellbeing podcast. I am so grateful to have you here today. It's been a long time. You're a busy woman, so I'm so thankful that we could have this mutually available time to get together and talk about you. This is Women's History Month.
Yeah,
And not just you,
it
but you being a leader and you working as an owner, an entrepreneur as well, of Laid to Rest Crematory and Funeral Home. And so can you please just share with the audience a bit about who you are, what you do, what is Laid to Rest and Crematory and Funeral Home, and please just introduce yourself to my audience.
Okay, I would love that. Thank you so much again for allowing me to be here. It is National Women's Month, so congratulations to you as well for all that you do to serve others. Best life of well-being, and you always look like the best life, and you're very inspirational. So thank you for that as well. Yes, so I am Ruth Pegeron, and thank you again for allowing me to be a part of your guest audience. I am the owner and founder of Laid to Rest Crematory and Funeral Home. But a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved to Washington, D.C. in the 90s, 92. And I got really involved in a retail career. My first career was traveling from New York to Puerto Rico, pretty much for Macy's department stores for 17 years. I've had a wonderful, wonderful, good life, have a good life, not too many stresses at all. So I really can't complain. I am the youngest of, I have six brothers. One is deceased. And didn't have any children. I'm not married. And I have helped my brothers raise my nieces. And I love my nieces and nephews. So that's kind of a little bit about my life. And now I get to see the great nieces and nephews come. Which is pretty cool. I can understand how like grandparents feel. So that's just a little bit about me. I've lived mostly here in the Fairfax, Virginia area. And my travels have taken me a lot of different places. Laid to Rest evolved as a result of me leaving my first career at Macy's to care for my mother. My mother went from critically ill to terminally ill. I mentioned that I'm the only girl, and so I pretty much was the one selected to care for her. So I moved back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My mom had one dying major wish, and that is that whatever you do, you're probably going to be the one to make the decisions for me. Can you keep me home? And home didn't mean just in the brick and mortar home. It meant in Pittsburgh. So that was what she really wanted. She said if I needed to move her where I was, she would accept that, obviously. Her care was first. But for a lady to have one wish, I really wanted to kind of honor that. Yes. She had pre-planned her whole funeral. I come from a family that pre-planning was a part of our DNA. So that wasn't an issue, where to be buried, clothes. At any given time, you knew what picture to put on a program. You knew all of that stuff. So she had all of that where you can just plug and play. So her only wish really was just, can I live here in Pittsburgh and die? And so I had to leave my career to do that and kept her home. And during that process, I say now that she was my co-founder. And the reason I say that is because through that process, everyone kept saying, you should help people with death. You should help people with death. And you don't know what that means. You're just going through the motions of helping your own loved one, and caring for her. And, we had great days. She was still out and about, we would do things. So everything was still very much really normal. Although she was terminal, we still were doing a lot of things. And I got to share in a lot of different activities with her. It wasn't like a terminal illness where she was in a bed for hours and days and pain. No, we were out and doing a lot of stuff. Every time I ride past a Kentucky Fried Chicken to this day, that was our Thursday outing. Thursday was our outing. We would go to one particular Kentucky Fried Chicken because it had a bench. My mother loved benches. Everywhere we went, she found a bench and we people watch. So every time I see a Kentucky Fried Chicken to this day, it gives me that memory of her and our Thursday outing. So during that process, everyone just would say that to me, the professionals, hospice care, doctors. And even one of the things I would do while I was taking care of her for my little break was basically the doctors would ask if I would be willing to come and share with other families going through this same experience. And they shared with me that, we were kind of odd in our receiving of such terminal news and bad news. And, at first they even thought that we needed maybe some mental help because maybe my mom and I and our family was in a little bit of denial, and they were very concerned about our mental space at the time. And once my mom kind of cleared that up, she cleared that up for them in a very direct way. Then the conversation started changing as far as it relates to her care. And so I would go, once or twice, every other week and speak to families for them. And it was how do I explain that experience? The experience was pretty much numbing in a sense that, I still felt like I was going through the motions. I'm always willing to help someone. So I felt like I was helping them. But at the same time, I walked away feeling like it was more rewarding than helping. Like, it really was a really odd feeling. But still, you don't know what that means. You're going through the motions. So coming out of when she died, I moved back home here to Virginia. My house was still here. And I kind of just was looking around like, okay, what do I do from here? You're in a lot of pain. So I thought I would just pick up the phone and just pick up where I left off at Macy's. It had only been a year and some change, if you will. And it just didn't work out so smoothly. And so I was grieving and didn't have much to do. So I just started, playing back those conversations of what the people would say, as far as you should help people with this. And I just went to the local, community college, Northern Virginia Community College, and I looked in their directory and I saw several classes on death and dying, religion and death, anything that had a death in it. I just signed up for the class and I just took the classes. The other thing I did is I took a deep dive into self and just a grieving experience. And I started writing. So I wrote a book during that process. I dedicated it to my mother. She had, again, given me that experience. I named it after her house, which was called House of Plenty. That was the name her friends named her house. So she was really, that experience of her dying and the death experience was really catapulting my heart, my mind, my spirit. It was overtaking me in a lot of ways. And going through it, I thought it was just a grief part and just what I had experienced watching someone really die in my care, just she and I, and the whole process of that. So, you're digesting all of this stuff and then you don't have a career anymore. So how are you going to get income? So all of these things are going on and you just got to take it one day at a time and one foot forward. And that's kind of what I did. I isolated myself and the only real thing I could do was write and walk. So I walked daily and I wrote and then I took those classes and everything was just coming my way towards death. So one day I woke up and wrote down lay to rest services. It came in me and lay to rest. And in my journal, I would just say, what does that mean? Every day I would say, okay, what does this later rest services mean? I'm very, into my connection with God. I was like, what does it mean? So, and that was in 2014 when I wrote down later rest. And so my heart was always just to help people plan and how important it was to plan because I watched my grandfather, who always taught us to be responsible for your total life, not just your living life, not just, getting a job and feeding yourself, but when you die as well. Like you got to take care of this. And in his day, that's what he did. He had burial plots. When he died, I remember my aunts didn't have to do much. My mom and my grandmom, same thing. And I'm watching these experiences and you don't realize. And then I'm fast forwarding as I become more of an adult and I'm experiencing this and I'm the one dealing with it. It really was a legacy that he left to handle all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I love, I call myself a whole life death doula.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that reason, it's so
Yes.
important to consider your whole life. I wish I had known this when I was younger, right? People always say, what would you say to your younger self?
Yes.
What advice would you give to your younger self? And that would be the advice, really, to consider your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are, in many cases, in the moment, thinking about what's going on, climbing the career ladder, raising children, doing homework, whatever it is we're doing. And we're focused right there and not thinking one day, for instance, with my life, one day I'm going to have an empty nest. What am I going to do with an empty nest? Right. So we don't really think ahead, and it really is important. I have a couple questions based on what you said. I mentioned to one of my clients that I believe death is a teacher.
Mm-hmm. It is.
And because many people don't want to talk about death or think about their end of life, that statement kind of bothered her. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? I mean, listening to your story,
yes,
you gained so much through honoring your mother's life and allowing that experience to guide you and teach you.
Mm-hmm. It does. It is. And I agree with her. That statement is as simple as it is really as complex it is. Death is a life changer. It is a life changer. It is one thing that if you receive it, well, if you sit in the pain of it and you really let it guide you, you will go in so many different directions. Now that I've been in this space, operating and serving others and helping others, and I teach grief classes, one of the things that happens to a very large percentage of people is their career change. Their careers change, their jobs change.
Yes.
It's just amazing of what happens. So death is definitely a teacher if you allow it. And it can teach you good, bad, and indifferent. My mom's experience, she was definitely the co-founder of this. This taught me how important it was. And it taught me that there's a profession. I never really looked at the profession in total, meaning I always knew there's a funeral director. Okay, somebody that's going to love the loved one, take care of the loved one at the end when the death occurs. I got that, someone that's going to do the technical things of taking care of the loved one. But the profession really is so much more than that. It's an educating profession. And death being a teacher has really helped me, and her experience helped me see how important that is to others and how important it could be when others receive it. So I agree 100%. Death is a true, true teacher. Yes.
And I'll just add to that, life and death. I think maybe people can digest it more if you say life and death are teachers rather than just death. What's the title of your book?
So my book is named after my mom's home, which was her friends called her house the House of Plenty. And when I stepped into her home and had to care for her, I made a vow to myself. And that was that this was her home and I was going to be carrying out her home, how she managed her home, not how I wanted to manage her home.
Yes.
And my mom had a couple basic things that were very important to her. One, every morning the blinds had to be open and the curtains open. Like every morning, if by 10 a.m. they're not open, something's wrong. So that means as soon as they open, her friends come, people in the neighborhood stop by. She just had an open door like that. And then the other thing is she wouldn't necessarily feed people. She wasn't doing that, but she always had something for them, some kind of drinks, definitely the drinks, some kind of soda, something. Pop is where she's from, Pop. Something was always in that refrigerator. And then so Milton, which is God rest his soul, but Mr. Milton was one of the gentlemen, and he would come and he's like, "What's in there to eat?" And then it got to the point where then I'm like, "Oh boy," I think she was always, if they do ask, she'll have something. And she would make me get something. And so one day I asked them, there was a drug addicted lady that would come as well. And she would come and borrow money. And I was like, wait a minute, my mom's would give you mom. My mom say, yeah, give it to her. And I'd give her the money or whatever. And then she would always bring the money back. And I was like, Mom, she's bringing the money back. She's like, oh, yeah, she's good like that. She's not like everybody else. She'll bring the money back. And so I was doing that. And I was like, my brother was like, quit doing that. You can't, it was like the funniest thing. But I kept saying, no, I vowed to do this. But I asked two of them. I asked her and I asked Mr. Milton. I said, what is it about my mom's house? Like, why is it like this? What's your and Milton, he said, this is the house of plenty. And I said, really? I said, what do you mean? A house of plenty of soap, pop, like house of plenty food? He said, actually, no. He said, it's way more than that. He said that it's a place we could come and talk to her. She keeps our secrets. You can vent. Her goddaughter would come there. She's a Patti LaBelle impersonator. She would come and show my mom her outfits and what she's going to wear and do her performance. And so many people were doing things there because it was a safe place.
Yeah.
So they call it the House of Plenty. So that's what I titled the book. I titled the book The House of Plenty. And it made me just reflect on what this month, what a woman is all about. Yes. And the power of a woman and how they are such an important role in nurturing. And I mean, let's face it, nobody exists without a woman.
Absolutely right.
No human being can exist. And so that's what geared the book.
What's your mom's name?
My mom's name is Ollie. Ollie, Ollie.
Beautiful legacy.
Yes.
Ollie has a beautiful legacy. And I'm looking forward to now reading your book. I'll definitely be getting a copy and reading your book and learning more about Miss Ollie. I'm looking forward to it. And the House of Plenty. And I love that, when the gentleman described the house, yes, you can get food, but it's not physical food. It's spiritual food. She fed your spirit. And that is so amazing and such a beautiful legacy to have and to leave. And such a great example, right? Because you get to carry it on. Another thing you said is, you put her desires and needs first. And that's what you do in the end of life or death industry.
Yes.
It isn't about you, your personality, you showing up, telling people how it should be, what they should do. You're listening and allowing them to guide the process and helping to facilitate their needs. And I love that as well. And grief, for instance, is different for everyone. And so, you definitely got to be present and you got to hear where, you want to help, but it's really their journey and you're there to help them help themselves.
Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right. And that's one of at Later Rest. That's one of the things when people say, well, what makes you different? And I just, I say, we do it your way, not our way.
Yeah.
We do it your way. We step aside and we're going to do it the way you want it to be done. And that's just how it should be.
So I love that you also had the opportunity to spend that time at the end with your mother. Not everybody is, you know, has that opportunity. And that's so beautiful. It really, really is beautiful. My father died in 2014, and in 2014, I didn't know anything about being a death doula, didn't really know what to do. And actually, my father had been sick for about 8 years. And then in 2014, he was in the hospital. We were home for his birthday. He was in the hospital, and everybody just assumed, oh, dad's always bounces back. He'll be home. And the one thing I learned for sure is that every single moment is sacred and that we cannot take anything for granted. My dad never made it home. And though that last night I was with him, I prayed with him, I hugged him, I told him I loved him, I took pictures, but I still was clueless about the signs. There were signs. There were signs. And I left Sunday night to fly to PAX or to, because I had to fly back to DC the next day. And he died the next day.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I put my job and everything ahead of being present with my father. And I won't say I regret it. Of course, if I could go back in time, I would do it again.
Of course.
But I learned so much about sacred moments, not taking anything for granted. And also that in this world, nothing else matters, not the job, not the flight, not the anything else. Those moments, yeah, nothing else matters.
It doesn't. And, we all want them to come back, and we all want them to bounce back, and we all have that hope. So that natural denial sometimes is just there.
Right.
So it just happens because we're like, no, it's going to be okay. I mean, we don't operate in a deaf space every day.
Right.
We just don't. But we do operate in a lot of bounce back days.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So we just think that. So I can really, understand your experience. But to what you just said, death was a teacher for you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And here I am today interviewing you as a whole life death doula.
Yes.
And, just so grateful to have met you and to have visited your funeral home and, to be working with Jane, who thinks so highly of you and the work that you do. You have an excellent reputation in the community. And of course, I don't know a lot of people, but everybody I've met that know you, they brag and rave about you. Not just the work you do, but you as a person. So you're just like your mom in many, many ways.
Thank you so much. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that because, all our life we have so many titles.
Yes.
All these careers, we get, titles and all this stuff. And, my mom did kind of teach us like your only title is really your name. That's it. That's your only title is your name. And then what's your name stand for? Who are you going to be? What are you going to be? Are you going to be, what are your definition? What do you want to define it? And I just, have a personal mission from not just integrity, but just really, really embracing people. And moments matter to me. Moments really matter. They always have. Experiences matter. Even sometime going out with all of the ladies that's in this profession, inclusive of yourself, if we try to make a date, they're like, oh, well, where do you want to go, Ruth? Or I don't care. It's the company, it's the experience, it's the moment. Oh,
Yes.
you don't, they'll send out a list of restaurants, pick one. I don't care. What I care about is being around you guys. I'll drive. I don't mind driving anywhere because the moments matter, the experience with others matter. It just makes such a difference to me personally. And that's just what I've always wanted to represent as well. Integrity, honesty, a positive, good word, depositing in your life something favorable so that you can have something to hang on to from our engagement. Yeah. So thank you for that. Yes.
You're welcome. So let's talk a bit about some of the services you offer at Laid to Rest Yeah, just some of the services you offer. Now, obviously, it's a funeral home. People
Yes.
know what funeral homes do, but first, I guess, are all funeral homes the same?
Yeah, so all of us are the same, meaning uh, pretty much depending on the state, there are some licensing differences. But the real core of, in the United States, all of us funeral homes are the same. We're supposed to be guided under the same principles. And that is to be able to bring a loved one into our care, handle them with respect, dignity, and care for that family with compassion, empathy, and providing a service for them that they want as it relates to either a cremation, a burial. So when you talk about the functions of a funeral home, yes, that they're the same. We're also the same in how we're structured legally. So, every funeral home, every funeral director has some guidance that they have to follow across the state from an education standpoint. You got to go to mortuary science school. Most states, you have to do some type of apprenticeship. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, you definitely have to get your education and apprenticeship, and 2 years, and then you become a funeral director. As far as our funeral license to have an establishment, yes, we're all the same. We all have to go through the same process. That's why, I'm grateful to have been inspired to open. That was never the vision. The vision was always just to have later rest services, go out there and educate people how to pick a funeral home, how to know pricing. That was my really goal, meeting people like yourself, Donna, and Jane, and all the other Maureen, all those people, and just helping them in their professions, because you're touching the loved one, you're touching the person. So I wanted to be the person that helped you touch them by educating them, so you didn't have to walk away. So those were some of the things for me. And once I started getting more and more clients, and I was doing that, I started having obstacles with my own profession. So I would help a client say, you know what, I would tell them, here's 3 choices based on what you say you want to have for your loved one as far as a funeral home goes. And they would pick a funeral home based on, I would explain to them and do the legwork of what they offered. And then some of the funeral homes would give me some challenges, meaning I'm giving them a family, but they would say, okay, well, you can back up. You don't need a celebrant anymore. We'll have our own celebrant do it. And the family would like, no, we hired her. And it became awkward. And one day I was coming out my door. I'll never forget it. I was walking out my door, and these little showers were coming down, and every now and then that has happened in my life. And so, and a big old, I'll just say light bulb for a better word, people relate to that. But it just came to me as like, you have to be one of the choices. And I was like, what does that mean? It's like, no, you have to be one of the choices now. And I was like, okay. So, and it was very clear, when you helping someone, you can definitely still refer them to others, and you still help them understand the differences. But now you'll have your own place to say you can pick from. And it was like, whoa. So I thought it was going to be some monumental task, because I thought maybe, the larger corporate funeral homes versus a small funeral home, they had different requirements. Oh, there's no difference. So everything on our wall to be as an established funeral home, if you will, is the same as the largest of the largest, so we're no different. And all of the rules and the laws are the same. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because I thought it was a bigger feat. It's not. It's a very small feat. And so where we're different is we're allowed to be different, and really in 3 ways. And those 3 ways is our locations, obviously. So wherever your brick and mortar is, that's, you're allowed to be different there. You're allowed to be different in your service, your customer service, how you treat people. That's what you're allowed to be different in that. And that would be something. And your last thing you're allowed to be different in is the pricing. So all funeral homes, we have the same words on our funeral price list, because the SEC, the federal government, tells us we have to. So all of our words say the same thing. But when you get to the far right, all the pricing is different. So that's where we're different, to answer your question, those three ways. Everything else, we're governed pretty much the same and under the same umbrella. But our customer service. So here at Later Rest, where we pride ourselves, we're not doing anything majorly different than how funeral homes started. Funeral homes started in homes. That's why a lot of them look like homes. If you look at the history of funeral homes, a lot of them started in people's home. And that's where it all started. That's why you have generations of families. So that's really where we're kind of took it back a little bit, where instead of having people, we offer a concierge type service, meaning families don't have to come here if they don't want to. I can go to them. We can do arrangement conferences like you and I are doing it. We're talking today. We can do it that way through a video conference now. Everything is about the family and what this is a very, very hurtful experience they experience. Yeah. It's an interruption into their life. It just causes everything to change instantly. Yeah. So from as you probably experienced with your dad, from the moment he had breath to the very next moment he didn't, you just said it. Everything just changed for you. I mean, that instantly. So now I'm a funeral home and I'm gonna come in and add some more changes. No, let me try to mesh into what's going on in your environment during this experience. So we try to work at their pace. So we serve all religions. So if it's the pace that's fast, like our Ethiopian families, Orthodox Ethiopian or Jewish families or Muslim families, those are services that follow religion and tradition, which is from the time of death. Within the next 72 hours, they really want the loved one to be buried. Sometimes 48 hours. It just depends. In some cases, it's 24 hours. So we work at that pace. Then you have some communities where they're international. So there's a lot of traveling. So you may have a loved one in your care for 30 days. We specialize in our military and our veterans. We do a lot of work with veterans. Where we sit in Springfield, Virginia, we're 17 minutes from Quantico, 20 minutes from Arlington National Cemetery. So what we want to do for our veterans that's going to Arlington especially, it's not their fault that they can't get a burial for 6 months sometime, 5 months, 6 months. So we have veteran benefits here to accommodate them. We have a refrigeration unit that's very large, it's 15 by 30. And we did that on purpose because we knew Arlington would have waits, and we knew we serve a very heavy populated area of our veterans that are going to go to Arlington. So what we try to do here, where we differentiate ourselves, is really the concierge type approach, number one. And number two, the customer service exceptional, working at your pace, honoring your culture, doing things you want. Today, some people like old fashioned, they want to come to and meet you. Some people want you to come to their home and meet them. Some people don't want to see you at all. Some people want to do like this. However they want to engage, we're equipped to do it.
That's awesome.
It's not our way. It's going to be their way. And then lastly, I think we set ourselves apart as we're affordable. We're affordable. This death experience is very costly. It is the third largest expense that anyone will experience.
So what is it? House, car, and
death.
Oh, wow.
That's it. Yep. Funerals today in this market can be in the onsets of $13,000, definitely 10 plus, especially for what you would call a traditional funeral, which is, the viewing, a funeral, a burial, procession, definitely that. Here at Later Rest, we try to mitigate our cost, and we transfer that to the consumer. The number one way we did it is by me working. My other experiences as in a corporations I could have never done this today without having those. And I worked for the largest death care provider for 5 years, Dignity Memorial, wonderful organization. Definitely grateful for the time that I spent there. But there was a lot that I learned, and I had no desire at that point to even be a funeral director or a celebrant or own a funeral home. So I wasn't there learning that part. I was just there learning about death. I wanted to be in this space of helping people with this horrible event. But as I reflected back now that I did fast forward and God projected me on this side, I learned so much, which was number one, to help mitigate cost is a lot of those big corporate places, even large funeral homes, they don't even have to be corporate. It could just be a very large funeral home. As the society is changing and people have church homes or they're doing funerals at homes or they're doing cremation memorial services at golf courses. I've been all over the place doing these things. They don't use the funeral home space. And there's plenty of times we'd be working like, no funerals today. Oh, no, we have funerals, but we're just out.
Yeah.
Oh, you're out. They're not in the funeral home, but they have
Yeah.
to pay for that building because the building has to be paid for.
Right.
So I wanted to, I really wanted to not have a really large building because I just didn't want people to have to pay for something that they're never going to use.
Yes.
So that's one of the main ways we mitigate our costs is to make sure that we keep our overhead expense reasonable so that we can transfer that to the consumer.
You said a couple things. Oh, one was religion, and traditions.
Mhm.
First of all, I think it's really great to be exposed to that much diversity in
Yes.
religion
Yes.
and be able to honor people based on what they believe and honor their loved one in a way that is genuinely um, supportive of who they are.
People don't understand the alternative funeral. And the alternative funeral is really the celebration of life funeral, where you're taking what the person, who the person is, and you're making it custom to them versus
Yes.
tradition. So, yeah, so, you learn that there's, and I even tell people and they say, well, how do I do this? I've never done it before. Or they may have done it before, but it's a blur because it's always a blur. You
Yeah.
can do that. It's always a blur because it's just so painful and you
Yeah.
just don't want to be in this space, right? But most people, I tell them, look, first you follow family traditions. Then you can follow religion traditions, family traditions, they're interchangeable, whichever one in your life supersedes. Then the personal, people have personal, thoughts and feelings of what they want to have. And if you follow those three things, you usually come out with honoring your loved one with something that you feel pretty good about at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say about picking a funeral home.
Yes.
The way people used to pick funeral homes and the way they still do now, because no one's riding around looking for a funeral home. You can pass a funeral home 20,000 times and never really realize it's a funeral home because you don't look for that. It's not something
Yeah.
you go to. But the way that people pick a funeral home in the history of this industry has been grandma went there, great
Right.
grandma went there.
Right.
It's on the corner, it's right down the street.
In Louisiana, where I'm from, and
Uh-huh.
this is how it appears from the outside.
Uh-huh.
There's the Black people funeral home. There are a couple for the Black
Yes.
people, couple for the
Yep.
white people, couple for the Asian people, and
Yes.
everybody, all the Black people know to go here, and
Yep.
all the white people know to go here, and it's like so interesting.
It is. It is so interesting. And, the history of our country, you had to have that. Back in the day of segregation, you needed that,
Yeah.
But today is so different and that the people should not pick and those on those grounds anymore. I worked at one funeral home and they had told me, oh, you'll never serve a Black person here. And they were right. I never did. There's two places I never did. And that was because of that. I had one lady say, oh, we didn't come there. You worked there. We didn't come there because that's a white funeral. I'm like, oh, really? Do you know who's behind the scenes making up, doing the embalming and, putting the loved one in the casket and putting their makeup on? You'll be surprised who's behind the scenes doing
Yes.
that. And it's just amazing how people think that. And, I try to educate people that, no, you want to look at it from a standpoint of what your needs are to celebrate that person. Because, like, number one, if you have a church that you're taking them to, like our Catholic families, if they're going to do a funeral mass, do they really need a big building? Because they're not really going to be in there
Right.
much, especially if they're not going to do a viewing. So there's certain things that you really should take a deep dive in and say, okay, well, what do I need? Now, if you don't care, or you just say, hey, I don't care how much it is, it's just we've been going across the street for 25 years, that's what we're going to do, then that's fine. But if you really want to take you and change your experience, or research a little bit more, those are some of the things you want to look at. It's just basically saying, do I need all of that? What do I really need for them? And, you take it from there.
What are the benefits of prepaying for a funeral? So this is a multi-question. The benefits of prepayment, and then if a person dies in another country, another state, how does that prepayment help get their body back to where they want to be buried, or however they want to dispose of their remains? How does that prepayment help?
Okay, that's a great question, because there is something pre-funding and then pre-planning. So pre-funding,
Right.
pre-funding is basically, yes, you're selecting a funeral home and you're saying, okay, funeral home, I would like to, this is what I want. I want to be picked up from wherever I pass away. I want a traditional funeral, or I want an alternative funeral. I want a celebration of life. I want a cremation, whatever you want. You would pay for those. You would pre-fund those services by paying for those today. So that whenever the event occurs, the number one benefit for pre-funding, the number one benefit is you lock in today's pricing. So if you know that, you want to do that, you should do it, because you'll be locking in. So when the event occurs 25 years from now, or whenever it does, then you're already funded in 10 years ago pricing. There are some things in that pricing that may change a little bit. So for example, a casket. So if you purchase your casket today, and you pass away in 35 years and that casket doesn't exist, then the funeral home by law, has to offer your family a comparable casket. If that comparable casket is not what your family likes, then they would pay the difference.
Mhm.
So products that might not be around for when the event occurs, but the services are locked in. So the picking you up. So if, to pick someone up today is $400, just say $450. And 10 years from now, it might be $550. Well, you're going to still have that savings your family's going to have that. So pre-funding, that's the number one benefit of doing that, is doing that. If you die in another country or just somewhere else, your plan is always to die at home. Like the American death dream. I tell people the American death dream is always being at home.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yes, that is it. And the other American death dream is just not to wake up. Just go to sleep and not wake up. Like that's
Yeah.
really what people would like. So everybody pre-funds on those parameters, basically, that they're at home. If they're not at home and they do die somewhere else. So we had this happen not that long ago, the past year, where he planned everything to the letter. And unfortunately, it happened when he was on his vacation, not vacation, but he's a snowbird. So it happened when he was at a snowbird home. When that happens, the family has to make a decision. So two things. Number one, they could go to a funeral provider and say, look, we want to handle the funeral here where they passed away, or some of the services. However, we pre-planned at Later Rest, which is in Springfield, Virginia. And that provider will make a decision based on the pre-fund to say, okay, well, we'll accept that pricing. And they'll do it. Or they may say, we'll accept it, but you'll have to pay the difference because our services cost different.
Mm-hmm.
The other way that it's done, they contact Springfield, Virginia, Later Rest, and they say, my loved one has died in Miami, Florida. Where do I go from here? They're in a hospital. So I said, well, or you want to try to get them back home, or you want to keep them there? So then I would work with a provider there and just get them back to Later Rest on an airplane, stuff like that. The family would pay that cost for that. Then once they got here, then we would execute the pre-funded plan.
Okay.
If that helps you. Same with international. It doesn't matter where they are. The goal would be if the goal is to get them back here, to where they're from, then the family would use the funeral home, or they could do it on their own. It's up to them. I always suggest family, let us do the work. We speak the language, let's take some of the burden off of you. Let us do it. But they are more than welcome to do that themselves if they wanted to. Now, in the event of the last part of this, if they do pre-fund and that happens and they decide to carry out those wishes somewhere else, no matter what, their pre-funded monies, whether they decide to do something else, will always go to the beneficiary, even if it's not used. So anytime you're pre-funding a funeral, especially in a state, everybody should check their own state and see what the rules are. But here in Commonwealth of Virginia, Maryland, and DC, these surrounding the state and the District of Columbia, anytime anyone is pre-funding, their money never goes to a funeral home at all. It either goes into a trust that the funeral home has set up, and the trust will be in the trust of the loved one, or an insurance policy. Every funeral home is required, if they're going to offer pre-funding, we're all required to either partner with an insurance company or a trust company, and that's where those funds go. The funeral home don't get any money until the death occurs, and when the services are executed, and then that trust is paid out, or that insurance policy is paid out to that funeral home at that time.
So it sounds like a win-win. I mean, you don't lose anything.
You can't. Mm-mm.
Yeah, if you decide rather than having a casket and an elaborate funeral that you just want to be cremated and have an urn, stay in your home with your family, whatever the balance that's left over goes to the that. Oh, that's my dry. That's a win.
Yes,
That's
it is. It is. And then some people do annuities and they do different burial insurances, but that's a little different than actually doing it with a funeral home.
Okay. Yep. You mentioned as you were going through your training, well, you were, Spirit said to you, guided you that you've got to offer this yourself.
Yes.
And so as a death doula, or for any death doula, how do you see that service being complementary to the work of a funeral home? And do you see funeral homes accepting the guidance and the facilitation of a death doula more? So if a death doula is also a celebrant, I know you're a celebrant.
I'm a celebrant, yes,
but
I am.
Obviously, if a family member wants to hire Donna, then you would be supportive of that. Yes. So how do you believe a death doula can complement what you all are responsible for in a funeral home? How is my work complementary to yours?
Oh my goodness, it's like peanut butter and jelly. They are just like a car with keys. I mean, they go together. I mean, they have such interchangeable roles, and they have really the same role in a lot of ways. And that's really like my mission. Most traditional funeral homes, like, they don't welcome celebrants and doulas, and and that's where my obstacles was coming. I thought, wow, this will be a really good thing that, a funeral planner out there, it's not really heard of. And the funeral home was like, no, they just shut it down. But the real connection between the two professions is the client, is the family. That's the true connection. Now, a doula has such a honorable role. A family chooses that person. They choose you, Donna, to say, I'm going through this experience. I want you to be my partner and come alongside me. You learn about their family. You learn about their likes. You learn about their childhood. You learn about the loves, their dislikes. You learn so much. And then you help them. And you're like their extended family in a way, or in a friend that they just couldn't, because you come as a neutral person. You have no ties to anything except their experience.
Right.
Which is a life experience that now they have to deal with, that's not so favorable. Right. So you start with them usually at a diagnosis. It's not even, you just start with them at a diagnosis sometime. That can be terminal, and you just walk with them. So that can be 4 months, that could be 4 years. So that relationship is wonderful. So if they trusted you as a doula with that, now the death does occur. Why should you walk away from this family? Why should you walk away from loving them? I call it care to the end. That's what I call it. So now you would partner with me to say, okay, she has finally passed away, unfortunately. This is her love. This is what she does. Only thing I do is really just bring her to a place that is licensed to hold a person when they pass. Like a hospital holds people when they're sick and they care for them.
Right.
I'm a funeral home that's equipped to hold a person when they pass. That's all I do. And then you should be the one that's planning their funeral with them and what they like and what it looks like and how are you going to celebrate this person. Now I got to come in and do that. And I haven't walked with them for 4 years like you. So why do you have to go away? Like I'm so passionate about it because that's what usually happens sometimes. It's like, okay, well, my role kind of ends and yours kind of pick up. No, I want you to stay.
Yeah.
I want you to stay and work with that family because you know so much. You love them. You've been with them. So that's how I think we can work the best, together. And then all I do is I take care of you. Bring me their favorite clothes. You help me pick out their favorite casket or their favorite urn based on what you know of them, what you've worked with them. And then I work with you. You're like the middle person between the family and me to get the end result really laid to rest the person.
It's beautiful. And do you think you're unique in that way compared to other
I know
people?
I am. I know that I know because I experienced it.
Yes.
I did.
And then I guess the question is really, do you think things are changing at all, especially now that more and more death doulas? Do you think it's changing at all?
I don't. In different parts of the country, I was trying to look for something that I thought I had an article, and it tells funerals from the National Funeral Directors Association, and it's encouraging funeral directors to make doulas more of a partner and why that would be important. So I was encouraged to see it, and I'm like, wow, this would be great. So I hope it does. What I would say to tomorrow's National Funeral Directors Association, National Funeral Directors and Morticians Recognition Day, which is pretty cool. And one of the things that
perfect timing for this podcast.
It is. And my fellow colleagues, as I was reflecting, that was one of my wishes, is that they would be more embracing of people like yourself as doulas. And the reason is because it makes your life so much easier as a funeral director when you have someone like yourself that knows so much about the loved one. It's just a win. It just it couldn't be any better. Couldn't be any better. Now it's different if a doula says, you know what, I don't want to go that far. Totally different. Totally different experience. I get that. But if the doula says, no, I'm all in, I would love to do the funeral planning and the celebration of life planning. Tell me what you want and do that with the person. Oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
It's so beautiful so I have a patient who doesn't like death doula. She calls us soul doulas.
Oh, love it.
I'm your friend till the end. You can call me whatever you want. I'm your friend till the end. And so that's such a beautiful honor. And I'm amazed, because of the lessons I learned through my father's passing. I'm just amazed to even be in this space and never even dreamed of being in this space.
Death teaches.
Absolutely.
It does. And especially if you respond. And and that's one of the reasons, like you can't probably see on I'm gonna try to move here. You see it.
Rest well. So go to the outside.
Sorry.
Live well, rest well. Okay, I see it.
Well, and rest well.
Yes,
That's
yes,
so important. You should live well and you should definitely rest well. And
absolutely.
doulas to me help the rest well happen.
Yes,
Yes, they
yes,
help with that a lot when that happens. And the living well, that's what all of us are striving to do all the way. Look at your best life of well-being. I mean, that's what we all should be doing that. I tell people all the time, please eat as much spinach as you want.
right.
Definitely take care of yourself. It definitely has a quality of life element to that.
Yes,
But I'm sorry to tell you, you're gonna still die.
yes, you're
No,
gonna still die.
I mean, you can eat all of it. You can grow it yourself. You can do all
Right.
the things that but it's gonna happen. But no, your quality of your life by you doing these things, you're gonna live well.
Yes,
You're gonna live very well by doing those things.
yes,
But you do have to rest equally as well, and so you still should plan it. I have literally sat in circles of people where they say, "I am not going to die." By the time that they say that, and I'm like, wow, and they really believe that.
yeah.
But it's gonna happen. The other thing in my title, like lay to rest, I refuse to call it laid. It's not past tense, it's
Yeah.
present. Because what you just mentioned earlier, when people pre-plan and pre-fund their funeral, even pre-plan and writing it all down, even if you don't pay for it, if you just write all it down, loved ones left behind are so grateful to
Oh,
know
yeah.
what you want. They don't mind. People figure out money. It
Yeah.
takes, how long it takes to write a check? 20
Right.
seconds. That's how
Right.
long it takes. But do you know how long it takes for you to know what a loved one wants in their death when they're no longer here and they didn't tell you? Hours,
Hours. And even think,
days,
yes,
months.
yes,
Been there, months.
yes. And even after you make the decision, just thinking about the grief process, if you are unsure when you make the decision, that can impact you during your grieving
It can.
in a very, very negative or a very, very fulfilling and positive way. Like I'm sure with you, you knew exactly what your mom with Ms. Ali wanted.
Plug
And
and play.
it was you were able to ensure
Mhm.
that you could lay her to rest based
Lay.
on
Mhm.
what it is her preferences were.
Exactly. And all
Yeah.
of that is because in her heart, she laid it to rest herself. So
Yes.
when you pre-fund and pre-plan, you lay to rest. You lay to rest such a burden and a responsibility. It's active. It's not past
Yes.
tense. It's
Yes.
active. And that's where it's so fitting, and that's where it really comes from, is that it's just that it's for the living. And after you do, they walk away and say, you know what, I felt like I really did right by them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
laying them the rest the way they would want to. That's really the goal.
What should people be thinking about as far as their pre-planning? What like I know when a person comes to a funeral home, and I recently learned this, that you need your loved one's social security number.
Mhm.
Like what
Yeah.
information, vital information should people have filed away and they can easily access it so that when they come to you, they're not scrambling to try to find information.
Mhm. Yeah, I would tell you the two things. I'm glad you mentioned Social Security. And the other thing is that a lot of people don't know their parents' maiden name,
Mm,
or their grandma's maiden name, because who walks around their house saying, "Oh, grandma's maiden name is Ruth Jones." Like, nobody does that. It's grandma. Some people don't even know their real names
right,
because
right,
that's not how we interact in families.
right.
That's just not how we do it. So what I would encourage every single person, it doesn't matter your age. It doesn't at all, especially nowadays. It used to be only old people died. Now everybody dies. The
Yes.
world has changed. As you know, you can look at the news every day. These nightclubs are getting, having fatal incidents happen to them. People go to concerts now, and things happen. The
Yeah.
drunk driving has increased, the texting and driving. So the society and how people are dying is very different today. So this is something for everybody. It's no longer for old people.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I would encourage people, so I would tell people, you know what, at least tell your family the pre-plan. It's not always about pre-funding. But you can always say to your loved ones, you know what, just so you know, I haven't gotten this all figured out. But if something was to have happened to me yesterday, I would be wanting you to do this today. And that is, I definitely want to be cremated. I definitely want to be buried. I definitely want to be buried and go back home to grandma, where grandma is. You know, those are just some very basic things that you can settle right away.
Right.
You know, if you don't know, you know, one of the things I always say is a cop out for people is they say, oh, I'm gonna let my kids decide,
Right.
or they can do what they want. I'm gonna be dead. I don't care. I think that is such a cop out and responsibility, because do you let your kid pick your car? Do you let your kid pick your outfit today? Did you let your kid pick your house? Most times your kid is trying to give you advice, could drive and do different things. And you're like, go fly a kite. You know, I'm grown. I'm the adult here. I'm the blah, blah, blah. So now you're going to leave them this responsibility when it's going to be the worst day of their life. And so
Right.
anybody that has that kind of thought process, I'm going to strongly encourage you to change that, because it's the greatest gift of love that you can give anybody, is to at least tell them, pre-plan it. Again, they probably will figure out the money, because people come together to do that. But what you want don't. So I would encourage anybody just to come up with the basics, which is where I want to be buried, or if I'm cremated, where do I want to go? That's very basic. The other thing is pick who's responsible for you. You know, one of the things my mom had told me many years prior, she's like, oh, here's my I didn't want to hear it. So she closed the book. She's like, all right, she don't want to hear it, whatever. About 10 years later, after that or so, I remember the conversation was very different. It was, I know you might not want to hear this, but here's the deal. You're going to listen. Here's the plan. Here's my stuff. This is where it'll be. And this is what I'm going to be doing. You're probably going to be the one responsible. So you should just tell whoever that person is sometimes you're not giving them a choice if they're your children. If you feel like you have children that just can't handle it, just based on, you know, their maturity level, their age, whatever it may be, whoever it is, you should let them know, look, I don't have this all figured out yet, but you're probably going to be very involved. It could be a friend. It could be a neighbor. You're probably going to be very involved. They're probably going to call you if something was to happen to me. Here's what I would like. This is where I am so far. And you do need to leave things like a social security card, or just tell them where that is. And it's very basic by vitals. Most people know everybody's education level, but social security card is the one that the number comes up a lot. The other one that comes up a lot is the maiden names, you know, because on a death certificate in every state, you need the person's mother's maiden name, because it's for genealogy purposes, not the married name. So those are the two. And then the other thing I would encourage you, anybody, if you are responsible for someone, so if you know you're going to be responsible for whoever, not just your children, obviously, if something was to happen to anyone's children, they're going to be the responsible people. And that's a little different experience. That's out of order. But just say your parents, you're going to be responsible for them, and you're the only child, or maybe you have siblings and you're the one, the stronger one, to bring that up. Like, do anybody know what mom and dad wants? Or it may be a friend. I was responsible for my friend. You know, she was a neighbor turned friend, didn't have any relatives. And she's like, oh, can you help me out when this happens to me? I'm like, well, I will, but you got to do X, Y, Z.
Yes.
You know, you got to plan this thing out. You got to tell me exactly what you want, where your stuff is, your social security. Now, I got to kind of know your life, and I'll carry out your wishes. I will definitely take the responsibility, but I can't do it with competing with others, and I can't do it you know, in the wrong way.
Yes.
So if you know that you're the person that if something was to happen to another person and they're going to pick up the phone and you're going to be the responsible one to help, I would strongly encourage you to have a conversation with those people or that person. That's very, very important.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
And so then I want to close with the grief education classes. And thank you so much for inviting me to Grief Speaks.
Oh,
That
you're welcome.
I really wish I could have been at every single one of those conversations. And if you have any in the future that I could just sit on.
Yes.
Grief, you know, you talked about how spirit guided you to where you are and continues to guide you.
Yes.
The grief stays in my spirit, talking about it, understanding it. And, you know, At first, when I thought about grief, I just thought about death. But then I realized there are so many phases of my own life where I've experienced grief. I mentioned empty nest earlier, and
Yes.
I didn't know it when I was going through it, but that was grief I was experiencing during empty nest. And, now as I get older and I still have an empty nest, there's another form of getting ready to retire, grief, right? Every ending, there's some grief there.
Yep. Yep.
And so tell me about your grief classes.
We have to go through grief as a part of that associate's degree education. Coming out of it, any funeral director really can label themselves in that. A grief coach, a grief educator, and is encouraged for all funeral homes to do that. Before I became a funeral home or anything like that, I was doing grief work, actually for two churches. One, I was just selected, and it helped me go through my own grief walk. You never know what's going to happen to you, but that helped me because I pulled on that training and that experience, and I had to do what I was doing for others to myself.
Yes.
And then I just realized the work is so important. And the more and more I do it, I'm kind of like you. I just have a heart for it because hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And grief is something that's undiagnosed, undefined, and it hurts. And so when people don't recover from it or know what's happening to them, they just live a life of hurt of other people and themselves. And that's the part of death that people don't teach.
Yes.
I know for me personally, I never was taught that when someone dies, it hurts. No, I was taught, oh, be strong. They're in a better place.
Yes.
There's no more suffering. God needed them more than you.
Yes.
Oh, they lived a long life.
Right.
Oh, they were, accidents happen. You just got to be strong. That's all I ever really heard about death. No one has ever just said, look, when somebody dies, it hurts.
Yeah.
Not one person. So that's what my work is all about. That's why it's called Grief Speaks, because it speaks to you.
Yes.
And your response to it is what's going to make you or break you. And a lot of people are broken in this experience, and their life is changed. And their life is changed in such a way they can't define. They don't know where the hurt is coming from. They don't know where, because nobody told them when death hurt is an illness, pretty much. Yeah. You have got to do some work to prepare yourself to get out of it. So I am passionate about just the basics of when someone dies, it hurts. And it's going to hurt. And this is how you're going to get through the hurt. You have to be your own doctor. And these are some of the tools in being your own doctor that's going to help you. And one of them is sometimes people do have to go to grief therapy. They have to go see a professional grief therapist. I have done this work now for about 10 years. And it's been amazing when people come back. The reason I keep doing it is because people come back and say, oh, you were better than the therapist. I wasn't better than the therapist. I just had more logic. The therapist is designed to let you talk and listen. Right? You go, that's your time. You pay for listening. You pay for somebody to listen to you. Right? I do the opposite. You come to me for free and you're going to listen to me.
Yeah.
I don't want you to talk. I don't want you to talk. I invite people like yourself in, Maureen, all of the facilitators, Aaron, all of the facilitators I invite in. And I ask you, when I tell you, do you do all the talking, please? Don't expect them to talk back, because I know when you're in pain, you don't want to talk sometimes. And we definitely don't want to create a culture of sitting around a room, my whatever died, 10 years ago, and I'm still in this same space. We don't want that. We're trying to help you heal and live a life that is one with them, not physically here, with them in your heart and your mind and your soul, that you're still healthy. And that's really the goal of the grief work. And I just try to make sure that I'm pretty passionate about constantly telling them when someone dies, it hurts. And here's what you do. And there's a show called Intervention. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Intervention?
I have.
on Netflix now. So if you ever just, I would encourage you to maybe watch 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 episodes. And I guarantee you that in watching these episodes, what's going to happen is you're going to see one common denominator, and that is their drug use is a result of someone dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen that way. So
that's so interesting. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I interviewed one gentleman, and I've interviewed many people who their circumstances in their bad circumstances in life was because of grief, because of the loss of someone. So one gentleman, he started living on the street. He lived with his mom, and when she died, he became homeless. She didn't lose the house. He just lost himself.
He lost himself.
Started drinking and doing drugs. And, one day, thank God, he did wake up, and he got some help, but he realized through the treatment that it wasn't because he loved the drugs or whatever. It was because of the grief.
It was the pain.
He wasn't dealing with that grief. It was the pain.
The pain.
Yes.
Because, you break a finger, you go and you get a splint and you take a Tylenol. Everything we're taught, everything with pain, you take something and it numbs the pain, everything.
Yes.
Your leg hurt, your knee hurt, your head hurts. What do? You take something, it numbs the pain and you hope it cures it. So you take a drink, that's what it does. It depresses you. You realize, oh yeah. Whew, I could deal with the thoughts of mom now. And then the next day you wake up and they hit you again.
Yes.
So now you do it again.
Yes.
Nobody wants to sit in the pain. And so what grief speaks, what we do, it speaks to you. And we really encourage you to sit in that pain. If you have to sit in a chair all day and cry, we want you to do that.
Yeah.
Because 3 weeks from now, that's going to be so much more healing than the drinking, the drugs, the eating, the overeating, all of that stuff. Now,
back to your well-being. Yes. What's going to help the overall, your whole life.
Whole life.
Yes.
Yes. And what I try to encourage in Grief Speaks in that work, in that space, is that no matter what you go through, that loved one that passed away, that you've changed your life now in a negative way, you don't get permission for that because they wouldn't give you permission. They wouldn't give you permission. And they would not want, your father, Donna, would not have wanted your life to go in a negative direction because he died.
Right.
He would not want that. He wants you to cry a little bit. He definitely wants you to cry. He wants you to miss him. He wants you to talk about him. He wants you to remember Father's Day. Stuff like that. Absolutely. If he's in a cemetery, visit him, give him a flower or two. He will want those things. But your life to change in a negative way where you have just become homeless or alcoholic or drug addict or, a sex addict or just abuse yourself because he died, he would be so hurt. So I try to encourage people in that vein, like your loved one would never want this for you.
Yeah.
So don't give it to them.
Yes. Grateful that we've had the time to, I'm like you are when you go out with your girlfriends. Mm-hmm. If we wouldn't have talked about anything, I'm just happy to be in this space with you right now. I'm just so grateful I love the work you're doing. I love your personality. I feel the love. Whenever the first time I met you, I felt the love. Yes. And so thank you so much for making time for this conversation today. I really do appreciate you.
You're so welcome. And thank you for having me. And I look forward to us doing more.
And I'm happy that we're doing this interview. I think the theme for Women's History Month is to invest in women.
Yes.
And I will say that you have done that. You continue to do that. And thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. One of my Madeleine Albright. Mm-hmm. So she says, there is a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. Mm. And
Absolutely.
Madeline Albright, God rest her soul, she was a to the point person. And when that was one of her quotes, when she did pass, I ran across that. I'm like, wow, she's right.
That's right.
Women have to help each other. We just do. I mean, it just makes sense to me.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.